what she did, nobody thought she could do, including the president of the United States. They just thought what she did was a miracle. Have this major earthquake, and then 6 weeks or whatever later, folks are in class. So we all thought, oh my God, she'll be leaving, and Clinton's gonna grab her and give her some cabinet position or something. So because she did such a good job.
Do you think your ability as an educator, how you teach, did that time change how you taught and how you saw and work with students?
The thing that I think changed would be, and I have to use that today, we have to realize that our students come from different places and that they are vulnerable, and that when they arrive at class, that we have to be more cognizant of what may have happened before they got there, whether there is homelessness, whether there are money issues with our students currently. That started that process of me thinking about that, because students had all these challenges and issues. And if you're going to educate them, you're going to have to get around those issues first, or understand that those issues existed. And I think that was that was something that I learned, that in order to teach, there are barriers that you're going to have to work your way through with students. So in particular, there was a disaster that happened, but still today, I think I'm more aware of my students, and know that, and having to understand that they're all different. They all come from different places. And for some students, there's some baggage there that we really have to sort through as we try to educate them. Sometimes we think, I'm just going to teach, that's all I do. They need to get it. If they don't, it's on them. But I think going through that period of time with the earthquake made me a little more understanding that people are individual, and that as a faculty, you have to understand individualism of those folks and where they come from, or where they may have come from. Sometimes they'll let you know, sometimes they won't. But we just have to be aware of that. I think the earthquake made me very, very much aware of that, because while you're teaching, those kids are dealing with all of these issues, and you had to be aware of it. And sometimes I had students would sit in class and just start crying, and you have to deal with that. You can't, as a faculty, at some point, maybe not in the middle of the lecture, but at some point you want to call them to see if everything is okay. Is there anything that I can do for you, anywhere I can refer you to? So that made me a little bit more aware of my role as a faculty at that time was a little bit different. But I do carry that even today, trying to figure out where my students are and how I could best serve them, both educationally, but also therapeutically. We have to understand where these students are coming from, and it makes our role a little. It's expanded a little past just being an educator. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you to do something. Close your eyes for a second. And what is the first thing that pops up in your head, the first memory of the earthquake?
Well, was seeing an apartment thrown off its foundation. I had never seen that before. And it was intact. It hadn't crushed. It's just thrown off the foundation. Well, obviously you can't live in it anymore if it's thrown off. But it's literally almost in the middle of the street from where it was supposed to be. I had never seen anything on television. But here's the thing. You can see all this stuff on the news. You can see war on the news. It's nothing like seeing it in real life. And but also realizing when you would see that whoever was living there can't live there anymore. So where are they? I mean, that's simple. Whatever was in that house, they can't go get, memories, pictures, those kinds of things. But when I saw that apartment thrown off the foundation, but still intact, I had never seen anything like that before. So that's was the memory of one of the first memories of the earthquake.
Were you among the faculty who volunteered to clean up? I know there were some faculty who were so anxious to do something that they went up and helped clean the rotting food out of the dorms.
Yeah, no, I wasn't one of those folks, but I admire those that did do that. But we did other things to try and be helpful. I even did things outside of the university when I heard that there were people at food banks. And I said, again, we had some damage in my apartment complex, but it was livable. I mean, the water was out for 3 or 4 days, but other than that, it was livable. So I remember taking some food over to the food bank. to try to be helpful because and being appreciative that it didn't happen to me because I was just any of us is just a footstep away from being in that predicament that those people were in. So, but no, I didn't. I knew there were people that were doing things on the campus, and then I got a chance to talk to some of the personnel that was hired to clean up and to hired folks that were hired to document the earthquake. And one of our staff members, just as we speak, he's been digitizing old VHSs of the damage because he was hired as an independent contractor to document it, and then eventually he got hired as a full-time staff and has been here for probably 29 years. But he was hired, and a former student. Actually, he was a former student prior to that, but he was hired on the team to document. And I was shocked that he told me that those VHSs are still playing, most of them.
Really?
Because VHSs dissipate. And I was shocked. I said, where did they store those at? But yeah, he said they're digitizing them now. And so he says, the footage is still there from VHS. I was shocked.
Do you remember the reconstruction of the campus following the earthquake? Remember, it took
forever.
And Dr. Wilson's mandate was students and faculty in first and administrators last. So her trailer was the last.
Her trailer was. I remember the president had this brown trailers. I think there were two.
They were connected together.
That's
remember?
right. There were two. I still remember that.
Silver in the front.
That's right.
Or silver gray, and the brown one in the back.
The president was in a trailer, and I remember the provost going in that big MASH tent, and the provost is in the corner of that. I call it the MASH tent. That big
Mylar.
That big unit.
And you remember there was no privacy. They would have these.
There was no privacy. Yeah, no. But again, to the president, to Belinda Wilson's credit, she said, we're going to open this university, and she did. And she was a hero, not only to us, but she was a hero even to the government because, the fact that she was able to open was less of a liability for some other things. And so everybody also said, my God, the fact that she did this, we just knew that she was going to leave here and take a job in Clinton's administration.
Why did y'all say that?
Because what she did, nobody thought she could do, including the president of the United States. They just thought what she did was a miracle. Have this major earthquake, and then 6 weeks or whatever later, folks are in class. So we all thought, oh my God, she'll be leaving, and Clinton's gonna grab her and give her some cabinet position or something. So because she did such a good job, and I think that's what leadership is all about. A leader isn't a person that just has the title. A leader is people that can take hard situations and make them work for everybody.
What was it about her? I mean, think about it. She was a Black woman. So society's expectations are not particularly generous. What is it about Dr. Wilson that inspired that?
The first time I met her, I knew there was something special about her. And she was very down to earth, and that was one of those things that if you were to meet her, you wouldn't know that she was a university president. When it happened, we just thought this place was going to close for a semester, and she just says it's not. She says it's not, and I remember thinking that that's what a leader does. She says we'll find a way. And apparently there is bureaucracy in FEMA. There's bureaucracy in this government. I don't know how they did it, but they got through the bureaucracy and they got all of those trailers on this campus. And again, I think we were only a couple of weeks behind the semester as it would have opened in regular times. So that's hero status when somebody's able to do that. So because everybody's lives, as I said earlier, would have been changed because we're worrying about how we're going to get paid, especially lecturers and people that are temporary or part-time. Well, they're paid based on the availability of classes if you're a lecturer. But we didn't have to worry that much because those people were taken care of and we didn't have to go down that route at all.
Were you surprised that enrollment only dropped a couple thousand that spring semester?
Yeah. And I don't know if folks were saying I probably need to finish my degree for therapy, or I don't know. But yeah, no, it didn't drop that much. The people were back. The classes were pretty much full, and the students wanted to learn. And again, they wanted to learn, but we did have the caveat of their personal crises that are going on in many of their lives, and so we had to work around that. And but overall, looking back on that, it's an example for what others need to do in time of crises. I mean, it's just an example of what needs to be done. So it was done.
Question. Okay, so you're at CSUN, and we tend to be kind of insular when you're at CSUN. You know, you tend to forget the rest of the world doesn't see us. What did your friends or family say when you told them you were working in the trailer and walking off on 2x4s to get through the mud to get to your trailer, and you had students going to UCLA for the library or going to the local church for a class?
They didn't say much. They get it because my family's back in Ohio, so they saw it all in the news. But what was interesting is that semester my mom came out to visit, and so things are still. This was a planned visit, as it was to visit later that year. And when I remember when I brought her here, she's a Christian lady, a Southern Christian lady, right? And I remember when she saw all of this up here in the apartment complex on Reseda, where the third floor was the first floor, all she said was, "Lord, have mercy." That I remember. She said, "Lord, have mercy." Because she had never seen that either. And she grew up in Jim Crow South. So there were things that she did see, but she didn't see that were buildings that crumbled. And so that was her reaction. And then also to me, it was that you're lucky that I should go to church more often. That's exactly what she said.
Did you take her advice, or did you just took it under advisement?
Advisement.
It's a really dumb question. Are you ever going to tell, do your daughter, or your grandson's too small, do they appreciate, the people who were not here, or even your colleagues, do they get what that time was like? Because now we're the veterans of the university.
Yeah, I think some do. I think some do, but I think more and more, we're having other disasters, because of climate change. We're having a lot of things going on. So I think the students are more understanding of what that was because of what we're seeing now, and that their lives can be upended any day now. And there's other disasters, not only that, but some of the societal disasters like shootings and killings and the crime rate and fentanyl. Students are all. This is their generation now, and these are the things they have to tap dance around. So I think it makes them more aware of what happened during the earthquake. But we remind them quite often, the building we're in, this is a FEMA building. It wasn't on the plan. It wasn't in the plan to build the Manzanita Hall. It's a FEMA building. It's a nice FEMA building. So we do remind the students of, the transformation of the campus because of the earthquake. There were newer buildings built. And so it was always a beautiful campus, but it's even more beautiful as a result of the earthquake. So we remind the students of that so that they don't take that for granted. And my staff member, George Johnson, who was once a student here, and he stays on the students about, no drinking or eating in the edit rooms, all of that kind of thing. And he says, because when I went to school here, we didn't have any of this. We didn't have screening theaters, and we didn't have film stages and television studios and surround sound mix facilities. So he reminds them that we didn't have this, and so we have to take care of it. And so the students hear him, and they do, and they do react accordingly. And if they see George walking, they'll make sure, if he comes near the other room, they make sure they're not doing anything. But that's the real reason, is that he was once a student here when we didn't have all of that. So that was the positive. If there were positives from the earthquake, was that we got new buildings, we got new stuff, but at the risk, or at the expense, not the risk, but at the expense of the disaster. And there were some lives that were lost. We still have scholarships in our department that were established by families whose children were killed during the earthquake. So we have so those are, you know, parts of the program that students that get those scholarships are taught, and who the donor or the family, of that particular scholarship, who that family is, and why that scholarship is in that person's name. And we have several of those in our department via the earthquake. So,
Is there anything you miss from that time? I confess, because I was hired shortly after the earthquake, what I really miss is that sense of camaraderie, of family, that I feel it's, as we age out and we retire,
that's right.
I mean, you or I could walk across campus and you would see someone from PPM and we knew them.
Right.
Because of the earthquake.
Right.
Because
it's starting to peel off and again, in my department, I still feel like a junior faculty, but I'm the most senior in the cinema, television arts department. So one of my faculty, Alexis Krasovlosky, one of my colleagues, retired, would have been May of 2022. Mm-hmm. And once she retired, and I remind folks, she's the last of the faculty that were here during the earthquake. And just there's a lot of institutional memory that I have now that Alexis has gone, that they ought to pick my brain. Because and sometimes in faculty meeting, I'll bring something up and nobody knew that was so. I say, you need to know that I could die today or tomorrow. Nobody knew that's what it says on the diplomas, because you've never seen our students' diplomas. I said, do you know this is what it says for our option and this is what it says for the other options? And nobody knew that. So there are those kinds of stories. And you're right, as people are starting to retire off, you're right, everybody across the campus, there was that commonality that we were all here during the earthquake, and that number is starting to become more minimal. There are a few still left, but in my department, no. My dean wasn't here. None of those people were here during the earthquake, and there are a few people in physical plant that were here. A colleague of mine in the library, she was once a staff, and now she's moved over to the faculty ranks. But you're right, it's becoming less and less. And there was something about being here together in that earthquake. Disasters do that there is a sisterhood and a brotherhood, and that's starting kind of to diminish. But I'm the only one in my department now that was here during the earthquake. Now, here's something that I did not know until they named that courtyard, the little courtyard area, the Belinda Wilson courtyard area. And I don't know why I didn't know this. But I didn't know until about 6 or 7 years ago that monument there has the name of every faculty and staff that were employed during the time of the earthquake. I have gone past that thing so many times, and someone, I forget who it was, pointed out to me. They said, were you here during the earthquake? I go, yeah. They said, your name would be on that. I go, really?
Someone pointed it out to you?
It may have been you. And I went over there and I found my name. I go, I didn't know that. Isn't that something?
Did you know anything about the pillar?
No.
She commissioned it out of her own personal funds.
Wow.
And one of us had to go through and check every name to make sure. And I'm not on there because I was hired after the earthquake happened. But that's every single person. That was her way of saying thank you.
Wow.
And do you know what it's made out of?
No, what?
One of the surviving columns.
Oh, that I did know.
From the parking structure that exploded.
That I did know. Yeah, so that's down. Yeah, so I saw my name and said, well, wow. It's little, but it was on there. I think that is such a tribute. It is such a tribute, and I think those are the moments where we all have to be thankful of everybody. We have to be thankful of the administrators, because they're in another particular position to work through all the bureaucracy to have built up this campus. But on the other hand, they have to be very thankful of the faculty. None of us were paid a dime more, right? But the faculty and the staff put 300 or 400% into building this campus back. And we should never forget that it takes that kind of dedication to make things like that happen. And folks were there to make it happen, and folks did it. I saw faculty just doing whatever, as I said earlier, faculty who were being therapists, for Christ's sake, having to work with students in a different way because of all the trauma that the students have gone through or were going through, and in light of their own traumas that they may have as faculty in their personal lives. So those were heroes. So, but many of them have retired, and some people I'm still in contact with, but some people not only have retired, some people have passed on. But yeah, so the campus is slowly moving away from that era of those that were here during the earthquake. Yeah.
Are there any memories or sounds or visuals that can trigger for you a PTSD? Someone pointed out to me recently, PTSD thought about the earthquake.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, was that listening to that parking structure move because it had collapsed, and it would just eerie, and you're teaching it, and all the students are looking. It was eerie. It's very eerie, and if you had a night class, it was even more eerie. So those are the sounds, was the things moving. Things were still settling on the campus, and also aftershocks. The aftershocks sometimes that trailer would jump up and down. And then of course everybody's ready to run to the door because
And you're on the trailer.
You're in the trailer. It would jump up and down, and but the sound of that, I will never forget the sound of that parking structure. It would move. And nobody would understand. If you didn't tell someone that, they wouldn't understand. Why would it move? It's fallen already. Well, for whatever reason, it was still moving and making those noises. And so that was there for a while until they had to completely move it out and destroy it and tear it down and then rebuild. But it moved for months. You could hear that eerie trailer, the eeriness of that parking structure while we were in the trailers.
Are you surprised? I was, and I think that we only lost, in all respect, we lost 2 students. But considering the extensive damage, we only lost 2 students.
Right.
And they were in that apartment building
that collapsed.
pancaked.
What we did lose in my department were alumni that had been students recently had graduated. So some of our scholarship money came from folks that have been students recently and their parents, because they died via the earthquake, and the epicenter was Northridge, that they had given us money back to provide scholarships. So, but you're right, just the amount of students that actually died that were current students could have been more.
I was just stunned that it was only the 2.
Yeah, it could have been more, because there were more people that died around. There are people that died even outside of the Northridge area, the broader Los Angeles area. Again, as far down as mid-city, the 10 freeway collapsed. So there were people driving under that, So, but yeah, we were lucky when it comes to the actual fatalities at that time. We were. But speaking of that apartment on Reseda, that was another eerie thing to look at. And my mom saw that when she visited, and that's another, Lord have mercy. When she saw, I said, Mom, that's the 3rd floor. And that's the first. It's now the first. So anything under it, those people had to bail out of there, So, yeah.
Are there lessons that you wish that we learned from that earthquake? Do you wish people would learn now or listen to us now?
Well, it's something I think anybody in California, an earthquake-prone state, needs to. And I still don't practice it, and that is being prepared with the earthquake kit in your car. I mean, that's the thing that we all could have, the lesson we all should have learned is being aware. And also the preparedness and the duck, cover and hide and that stuff. After that earthquake, people were really more in tune to that. Before that, you heard about it, but nobody practiced it, and nobody, you heard about it. There's supposed to be an earthquake kit. And, but I think after the earthquake, everybody's more aware of that. The other thing is again, taking things for granted. The house that you own, if you don't have the proper insurance, you got to have earthquake insurance. There are a lot of people that didn't have earthquake insurance, thought they wouldn't need it. Fire insurance now, it's one of the things you got to have because we have fires. If if someone will underwrite it in California. So I think people were more aware of preventing earthquakes, bolting things down. I've had lots of friends that start bolting things that could move, like their bookcases and stuff, would bolt them down from the back, because those are things that, during the earthquake that was documented that hurt people or killed people were things jumping. And so I think that's what we learned is that it isn't something that may not happen for 50 years. It's something that can happen any day now. So, and I think also via that quake, people learned how to treat each other a little bit better. Your colleagues, they deserve the respect. Your colleagues have to be your best friend. You don't have to go to dinner with them. I have a lot of people I work with. I only see them at work. I don't socialize with them, but I respect them. I respect the work that they do here, and they have a right to be here. And I give them that respect. And I, in return, I expect that same level of respect. I think after the earthquake, people were more respectful of one another, especially when we're all here in the trenches trying to make this university work. So, yeah.
Was there anything else that sticks out from the earthquake you wanted to share?
I'm still here.
Thank you for joining us as we marked the 30th anniversary of the 1994 Northridge Earthquake and its impact on California State University Northridge, with conversations with former journalism chair and Associate Provost Cynthia Rawich, alumnus George Salas, and film professor Nate Thomas. Check out the Seats and Conversations website for the latest news about our podcast series, Matador Memories, and diving into the discourse.